Israel's assault on Qatar was not simply another spark in a region accustomed to unrest. It was a shockwave, a geopolitical rupture that exposed the fragility of American influence, unfolding directly under Donald Trump's leadership. This wasn't merely an attack on a Gulf nation. It was a strike that pierced the very foundation of Washington's security role in the Middle East, and by extension, America's claim to global supremacy. Trump later stated on Truth Social that he was informed of the strike by the U.S. military, not by Israel, just before it happened, and that he attempted to alert Doha. But the truth is clear. When the missiles fell, the American president hesitated. In a region where moments are measured like lifetimes, his delay spoke louder than speeches or promises. His call came 20 minutes after the attack was over, and in that narrow window, what collapsed was not just buildings, it was credibility. Qatar is no insignificant player. It is the linchpin of U.S. military power in the Gulf, home to Al Udeid Air Base, the largest American facility in the Middle East, where more than 10,000 U.S. personnel manage operations across Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. It is a titan in global energy, holding roughly 13% of proven gas reserves and exporting over 80 million tons of LNG annually, sustaining Europe as it replaces Russian pipelines and fueling Asia's industrial giants from Tokyo to Beijing. Its sovereign wealth fund, valued at nearly $500 billion, is interwoven into Western markets, owning shares in banks, automakers, real estate, and global assets. Yet when this pivotal state was attacked, Washington stumbled. Trump had spent months parading through Gulf capitals, clasping hands with monarchs, flashing smiles for cameras, and declaring that America was dependable. He cast himself as the deal-maker who could bring balance and stability. But when the decisive test arrived, all of that imagery crumbled. The gap between grandiose words and delayed action cut deeper than any weapon. Across Arab capitals, leaders asked, if Qatar, with its vast resources, its strategic U.S. base, its deep ties, could be struck without an immediate defense, what did that mean for them? For the Arab League, long balancing grievances with cooperation, the silence from Washington was the breaking point. Betrayal became undeniable. And in this region, betrayal is not easily dismissed. These are moments that carve themselves into memory, shaping policies and alliances for generations. As America faltered, Russia advanced. Moscow seized the opportunity to present itself as the dependable partner, offering arms, intelligence, security guarantees, and, most importantly, respect. Where Trump hesitated, Putin acted. Simultaneously, China expanded its economic footprint, deepening trade and infrastructure ties, while pushing forward with alternatives to the dollar. BRICS, once treated as symbolic, suddenly began to resemble the blueprint of a new world order. The supremacy of the dollar, once unquestionable, now seemed increasingly fragile. The strike on Qatar didn't create the shift, it accelerated it. The quiet grumblings of discontent turned into open defiance. Gulf states began experimenting with oil sales in yuan. Trade with China overtook American trade in several countries. Russia signed nuclear energy pacts and supplied advanced weapons. Financial networks started searching for anchors beyond the U.S.-led system. What had been gradual erosion transformed into a rapid drift away from Washington. The lesson was brutally clear. In the Middle East, timing equals intention. Every hesitation carries meaning. When Trump delayed 20 minutes, leaders read it as weakness, as indifference, as abandonment. That perception spread faster than the news itself. Suddenly, royal courts and presidential palaces were asking the same question. Had the American guarantee expired? For decades, U.S. dominance in the region was built on a single bargain. Washington promised protection, and Arab states aligned their economies, militaries, and oil markets around America. That promise was the invisible backbone of every alliance, every weapons deal, every compromise. The strike on Qatar shattered it. The trust was gone. And once trust vanishes, the vacuum fills fast. Russia rushed in with speed and confidence. China offered markets, infrastructure, and currency stability. BRICS provided the beginnings of an alternative order. The void left by Washington's hesitation is no longer empty, it is already occupied. This was not just an assault on Qatar. It was a hinge point in history. It revealed that America's grip on the Middle East, and by extension the global system, was far weaker than anyone admitted. Trump's delay was not merely a tactical misstep. It was a symbol, a warning, a revelation that the American century is beginning to fray. 20 minutes of hesitation in Washington are now shaping the future of the entire region. 20 minutes told allies that the US could not be counted on. 20 minutes told rivals that America was vulnerable. And those 20 minutes may be remembered as the moment when US dominance didn't just stumble, it began to unravel. The foreign minister's reaction was immediate, fierce, and crystal clear. His denunciation of the strike was delivered in words that sliced sharply, leaving no room for misinterpretation. In doing so, he drew an unmistakable contrast between Russia's firm response and America's muted silence, a silence that itself carried a heavy message. Across the Middle East, leaders were listening closely. They recognize that Russia can be harsh, but they also see something equally significant: Moscow's dependability in following through. In a part of the world where loyalty and betrayal are remembered not for years but for lifetimes, that kind of reliability carries immense influence. The repercussions of this are evident. The United Arab Emirates has steadily increased its purchases of Russia's sophisticated weaponry, binding its defense more tightly to Moscow. Egypt has inked vast, long-lasting energy agreements with Russia that will shape its economy for generations. Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of global oil, has chosen to openly align production policies with Moscow through OPEC+, effectively giving Russia co-control over the global oil supply. And the Qatar crisis has acted as the accelerant. What had been a simmering discontent with Washington has now transformed into concrete realignment, with Arab rulers turning toward Moscow, convinced that Russia offers the respect and seriousness the United States withholds. But this isn't confined to politics or image, it's economic, structural, and systemic. Every arms purchase routed through Moscow, every oil shipment denominated outside the dollar, every infrastructure deal redirected east represents billions lost to American corporations. For Russia, this situation is a windfall, a strategic prize placed in its lap. For Washington, it is self-inflicted harm, the result of its own misjudgments. More troubling still, Russia is not simply a competitor at the margins, it is stepping into the United States' traditional role as the guarantor of Gulf stability. Once that impression settles, history shows it is almost impossible to undo. Trump's hesitation to act decisively when Qatar was struck only entrenched this view. The effects are already being felt. Oil prices are surging, energy imports into the US are climbing in cost, and defense contracts once automatically awarded to American firms are slipping away as Gulf nations turn eastward. Meanwhile, the dollar's grip on world trade is weakening as more countries test alternatives. These are not abstract dangers. They are real, immediate costs, advancing faster than Washington can keep pace with. For Arab capitals, the assault on Qatar was not just another episode. It was a humiliation, a symbolic blow aimed at a country hosting America's largest military installation in the region. That embarrassment cannot be erased, not by Qatar, nor by its neighbors. Saudi Arabia and the UAE have already reached their own conclusion. If Washington cannot be relied upon to protect Qatar, then it cannot be trusted to safeguard anyone. If America cannot deliver security, then it cannot serve as the foundation of their defense or their economies. Their answer has been calculated: diversify their alliances, deepen ties with Russia and China, and empower BRICS to play a larger role in designing a global framework that no longer pivots around Washington. For decades, the dollar was the unshakable backbone of the global oil system. Every OPEC decision, every Gulf shipment, every barrel sold was priced in dollars. That gave the US unmatched clout, financial, political, and military. But now that system is showing fractures, and the Qatar episode widened them dramatically. What once seemed unimaginable is already happening: oil sales bypassing the dollar. Saudi Arabia has quietly accepted Chinese yuan for some of its deliveries. The UAE is actively exploring transactions that avoid the dollar altogether. And in 2023, Qatar signed a historic oil deal with India that was settled in Indian rupees. This was more than diversification. It was a loud signal that faith in America's stewardship is slipping. The dollar's supremacy rested on three pillars: steadiness, dependability, and alliance. Arab leaders now doubt all three. If the United States cannot be counted on as a protector, why should its currency remain the anchor of their trade? Why not shift to the yuan, the ruble, or regional systems promoted by BRICS? This isn't a far-off possibility, it is happening step by step. China, the globe's largest oil purchaser, is locking in long-term contracts directly in yuan. Russia, cut off from the dollar network by sanctions, is encouraging Arab states to build new financial corridors outside America's control. Even smaller Gulf monarchies are beginning to experiment with limited settlements in alternative currencies. Each small deal, each minor agreement, each incremental change chips away at the order Washington once assumed was untouchable. If the trend continues, the US may soon face a world where the dollar no longer sets the price of energy, and a upheaval with consequences that would redefine the global economy. Inside Washington, Trump is scrambling. Israel's attack on Qatar forced the White House into emergency damage control, prompting a high-pressure meeting with Qatari leaders in New York. Normally, such a meeting would spotlight strong ties and mutual interests. Instead, the atmosphere was tense, cold, and confrontational. Qatar did not come to celebrate partnership, it came to deliver demands. And across the Arab world, governments were observing closely. They knew that Trump's response in this moment could decide whether America still qualifies as a credible partner, or whether its slide into irrelevance accelerates. Trump did condemn the strike, but his language was soft. He called it unfortunate, avoided harsh words, and declined to suggest any punishment for Israel. Privately, he even reassured Israeli officials of Washington's unwavering support. To Arab leaders, this looked like weakness, a balancing act, soothing Qatar with polite phrases while shielding Israel from accountability. But Qatar is no lightweight. It holds nearly 1/4 of the world's liquefied natural gas exports, and its relations with Russia and China deepen every year. In New York, Qatari envoys arrived with leverage. Trump arrived with little more than hollow assurances. Unless he takes the decisive action Arab leaders are waiting for, demanding accountability from Israel, his remarks will be dismissed as empty. All signs suggest he will not take that step, leaving America's influence in the region dangling by a thread. This crisis is still unfolding. The behind-closed-doors negotiations, the shifting alliances, the oil contracts and new currencies, all are in motion. What is decided in the months ahead will shape not just the Middle East, but the future of the global order. Energy, trade, and security, the three great pillars of world power, are being rewritten before our eyes. Once these changes harden, they will not be easily undone. The next chapter of this confrontation is already being drafted, and its consequences will be impossible to ignore. Subscribe, stay updated, and watch closely, because the world we have known is beginning to change.